Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Waterfront Toronto's IREC committee. We have forum present, and I think we should best start off with the land acknowledgement that Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. Thank you for cheat sheet. All righty, the agenda and the materials were circulated last week to certainly the members of the committee and were made available, I hope, to all of everyone present. So I'd like to get a motion to approve the meeting agenda. Leslie, thank you. And thank you, Andrew. Oh, Andrew's here now. Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any discussion, any movement, any changes? I think we've adopted the new program where the in-camera session for the board will be at the very end of the meeting, so that we can.
Or directors only.
Sorry, directors only. The in-camera for directors only at the end of the meeting. I'm not quite sure that.
So I think we just need to accept that amendment to the agenda.
I think we were thinking we didn't need one this round, but the directors can always decide to have one.
Yeah. Okay. So subject to that amendment. Can I get all in favor of the agenda? Thank you. Carried. Are there any conflicts of interest? Seeing and hearing none. Move on to the consent agenda. And we have the draft minutes of the open session of this committee on November the 25th. Have they been reviewed? Can I get a motion? Andrew and Alicia, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Those are carried. Meg, over to you for the development project dashboard. I think we can
usually take those as read.
If
anyone has any questions, but
anyone? Any members of the board? It was a very comprehensive report. Thank you. It's great to see all the progress that's being done in all the various sectors. Okay, then Lisa, can I ask that you bring us up to date on our ESG endeavors?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack, and good afternoon, everyone. In terms of the ESG update for this quarter, which I did provide yesterday to the HRGSR committee and also earlier last night to the farm, so I apologize to anybody who's heard this already. We continue to progress the key initiatives that are outlined in this 2-page dashboard here, including implementing key areas of the corporation's climate action plan, which includes things like exploring a net target zero for Waterfront Toronto. And as part of that, we're looking at establishing what our baseline greenhouse gas emissions are in terms of a target for reduction and researching the different pathways to get to net zero, particularly for construction projects. And while Waterfront Toronto is not set an overall net zero target for the corporation, we do consider net zero on a project basis, such as for the Quayside development and Villiers Island as examples. This quarter, we amended our procurement policy to include new sections on social and sustainable procurement to ensure that these areas are considered as part of our procurement processes. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight that at the upcoming board meeting on March the 27th, our Director of Sustainability and Innovation will be providing a presentation to directors on our current climate action plan and a whole bunch of the initiatives that are underway there. Yep.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions of Lisa about her report or the materials? Seeing none.
I was just going to add, I mentioned this yesterday at committee as well. This is an important part of our brand, and it's really important that we share our progress as we go forward. So
great. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome. Okay. Next item on the agenda, the update on Quayside matters. Over to you, Meg.
Thanks. Charmaine, can you go to slide 21, please? So drum roll, good news. We closed on March 1st on the first phase of Quayside Blocks 1 and 2 with our partner Quayside Impact. And through that, we have secured all the public policy objectives and financial commitments made through the proposal process and their submission. So we're very happy with that outcome. At the moment, the work being done is advancing their municipal planning approvals as well as our public realm and infrastructure approvals. So working very closely with the city on that. And we are also working closely with ourselves, Quayside Impact, and the City Housing Secretariat to advance the affordable housing in phase 1. So we're having regular meetings with them and making some good progress. Next slide.
We should just pause and really enjoy this moment
Enjoy the moment.
all together. to
Including our
celebrate.
bank account, it's enjoying the moment. as
Exactly.
well,
Yeah.
so.
Exactly. So here to the team, you guys did a great job. Fabulous to be able to read that on the board that
Yeah.
we closed, and you've got the cash.
Yep, that's the plan.
Yeah,
We're about to make some GIC term deposits. Yeah.
And as Meg pointed out, I think the other important thing for the public to know is we got all the things that were promised in the RFP. So
That's fabulous.
Yeah, we're very happy. And we will have to have a virtual or a real celebration when everybody can be together. So
Good.
on this slide, this is the project timeline. So we are progressing, as I mentioned, both the infrastructure and public realm approvals that Water for Toronto is in charge of, as well as the approvals on the actual development blocks that Quayside Impact is pursuing. So fall, spring, we already started some of this. We've had a stakeholder meeting. We've also had a waterfront design review panel meeting. So we're working on the higher level documents, master plans, visions, et cetera. We're intending to have we'll have another stakeholder advisory committee meeting coming up, public open house, probably early May, and then a public meeting that would be required of Quayside Impact. It's not the statutory one, but it is part of the process. And they will come to design review panel at each stage of our progression. Summer, fall, again, we're just advancing our own designs, and they will be submitting their site plan and rezoning application. So another stakeholder advisory committee, a public meeting leading into a statutory public meeting. And then the design review panel will see how their designs are progressing as well as our own. And then fall, winter, so as we get to the end of the year, we will be putting the finishing touches on our work, and they will be refining their design program based on comments from the city and stakeholders. And again, we'll have more stakeholder advisory committee meetings, more public engagement, and the design review panel. So that's kind of the lay of the land over the next 12-ish months.
So Meg, if I could just for the board members, it did go, as you pointed out, to the design review panel. And Chris, do you want to just give quick highlights on the
Yeah,
feedback?
sure. I think overall the panel was extremely supportive and positive about the proposal. I think they loved the aspirations. They loved the designs. They liked the master plan. They're so enthusiastic, in fact, that they asked a lot of probing questions about how achievable it all was, because it seems so good. It's almost too good to be true. So if there was any skepticism, I think it really revolved around, are there actual buildings going to be able to look as good as these renderings are promising? Which I think is a great place to be with the panel, because I think those are the right questions to ask. And I think the team is very up for answering those questions. So I think it was a really good review.
What about the regulatory approvals related to the 12-story wood structure?
I don't think that's going to be a big issue.
We're going to be working through, the city has the building code alternate process, which we've done with the Arbor for George Brown, and then the T3 Bayside is also, yeah. So we're going to be using that same process. The city's aware of it, and so I think we're going to be
Oh,
in
so
pretty
there
good
is
shape.
a path under the building.
Oh,
code?
yeah, there's
there
a path,
is.
and it's been
Yeah.
used several times now on other buildings in Toronto.
Great.
So we're not even blazing a new territory.
Yeah, so I think we're in good shape there.
Is this since sidewalk? Because I remember when
Yeah.
the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's sense because they.
Well,
Probably
they've always
couldn't-
had- no, they've always
No,
had
they've
an
always had
alternate
this.
path
But
for
they
different
accepted,
things.
but they accepted 12 as more of a.
Yeah.
The code is gonna go there, and so I think the city's, predisposed now to making these projects happen, and because we've got 2 projects already underway, the alternate process for the actual mass timber projects is kind of being well laid, and I think we will
Great.
be will benefit from
It'll be
that.
an easy.
free work.
wonderful.
Sidewalks challenge was the city's basically acknowledged that up to 12 is reasonable. So if you're doing
They wanted
12, they're
30.
gonna let
They
you go
wanted
through, but they wanted 30 in the city.
And nobody's there yet.
Yeah.
All right, that's it.
Great. Meg, any questions of Meg or relating to or arising out of the Quayside project?
Shortest Quayside discussion we've had since I've been here.
You're here. Okay, well, with that then, I'm happy to move on to Villiers Island.
Okay.
So I've got Chris too.
So Chris,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna just do a quick intro
Yeah.
here. So one of the things, obviously, as we move on from Quayside, we're looking at other precincts that we need to start focusing on. We do want to talk about the Portland's overall. One of the questions the board member raised before was the vision. So one of the things that the 5-year plan is the plan of the board and the vision, but as we learned with Parliament Slip and Quayside, visuals make a big difference to understand what that 5-year plan looks like. So we have commissioned some work that we'll share later on in the meeting, but Chris is going to talk a bit about where we're at right now.
Yeah, I'm just going to give you an overview in this session and there will be some renderings later on. So Waterfront Toronto is working with the City of Toronto staff and Creatio staff right now on what we're calling a density optimization study. Council has directed city staff to look at increasing densities in several areas of the city, including Villiers Island. So we are working with them to try and make sure that we're achieving council's objectives of increasing the housing supply as well as providing more affordable housing on Villiers Island. So we have to re-examine some of the built form proposals that are in the approved plan for Villiers. And we're looking at a density increase of at least 30% and possibly higher on Villiers Island. So the study is going to prepare and is preparing right now a few different options of how you could approach the massing and how you could achieve a more optimized kind of maximum density, maximum realistic density on Villiers Island. So we're going to be getting those ready for a series of rounds of consultations with stakeholders, community, Indigenous communities. We're then going to do some due diligence to make sure that the island can handle all of that extra density,
Right.
and then come up with a preferred concept that will feed into a business plan.
Where did the 30% number come from?
The 30% number is kind of what we started with, and the city has kind of said that that number is a number that they thought was achievable. We're going to try and see if we can go even beyond that.
We didn't try to max out the impact of infrastructure, or we didn't work backwards from.
So the way we're doing
the
it,
road
really-
network, what the
well,
road
no,
network
so
can handle.
we're doing both. We're looking, that's what the due diligence exercise is going to do.
Yeah.
Look at what the capacities are or what increases might need to be made to the capacities to achieve the higher densities. And I think what we're trying to figure out is what can the island really comfortably hold? And then what do you need to support that? Can we provide that?
Right.
And so working
Yeah.
both those ends, we'll titrate down to the right kind of density.
So I think the approach that was taken by all three parties, us, Creatio and the city, is we know 30% is kind of an easy floor.
Yeah.
How far is all dependent on addressing the infrastructure and other needs that need to be there, whether it's transit or other. So 30%, I think everybody knows, is easily achievable.
Yeah.
And how far we go will be dependent on the other evidence to support that.
Can I ask a question? Just because of the history of the development and the waterfront LRT coming later, hopefully sometime in the future. Has there ever an opportunity where it would say, based on the existing infrastructure with no transit, no new, this is the capacity, and when and if that gets, then it's designed in a phased way that you can add more when you have more confirmation of the transit. I just feel like it shouldn't be just one or the other, because we could end up in a similar situation. We have lots of density and like we're sitting here begging for transit.
So there's
Yeah.
more information on that later in the.
But there's the ability to
presentation.
kind of think
Oh, yeah.
about it in that way.
We're
Okay,
absolutely
yeah.
gonna phase
Yeah.
it.
Leslie,
And
we had the same
Keep an eye towards
questions.
that, yeah.
We had the
Yeah.
same
Okay,
questions.
good.
It's
Yep.
making sure that over a period of time, we look at a phased in.
Well, it just gives the city a bit more skin in the game to push for the transit as well, because
Yeah,
they
but it
will
also-
benefit,
But
yeah.
it also gives you a platform with which to determine, maybe there should be an area specific transit levy.
Yeah.
and let
Exactly.
the development pay for it. Like,
Yeah.
in other words, you're gonna hit these thresholds, and if you wanna go from here to here, you know, it's $2,000 a unit or whatever. And have transit.
And those will actually come up in some slides, looking at what are the factors we're looking at with regards to that density issue, right?
Yeah, and paying for the transit line is part of the Wellert study that we're also doing in the design work that's happening. And there isn't a briefing specifically on that in this package, but that's something that we can brief the board on at the next appropriate time. So, do you want to go to the next slide, please? So just for reference, in the lower left, a little hard to read at this distance, is the approved precinct plan, which is kind of a mid-density, mostly mid-rise with a few towers in select locations. So the study we've been doing is intended to kind of preserve some of the fundamental principles about good urbanism and good urban form, but how do you know, really upscale the density on Villiers Island? So we're looking at different configurations of towers, taller towers, more towers, and maybe some different heights on some of the base buildings.
You're not expanding the footprint of the development here.
No, so that's what's not being reviewed. We're sticking with the development blocks we have. But, you know, they're at a kind of 4 times to 5 times coverage. So there's certainly room to make those bigger without having to even expand the footprints. So we're also going to try to think about some of the areas where there had been a decision to keep the densities very low, such as along the Keating Channel. We think there's some real opportunities there to go taller and higher. And that can actually create its own kind of very exciting urban environment and really increase some of the density achievable on the island. So the due diligence, there's a list on the right there. Jack, you can see it looks at all the things you were talking about, the transportation network. What can the planned one handle? What could we handle without the transit if we have to run buses in the short term, which will inform the phasing as to how much our first tranche of development could be in terms of square footage. And if we add density, is there an impact on the number of community facilities and other services that we need to provide or not? We want to look at the local park network, because as you know, we're building some of the Villiers Island parks through the Portlands Flood Protection Project. Some of the others are not funded. They're meant to be paid for by future development charges. Do we need to accelerate the delivery of those if we are increasing the density? That's another question that we have to answer. How we achieve our sustainability objectives. Can we achieve climate positive, particularly if we're adding all this density? Can we still make this a climate positive neighborhood, which was our initial goal? Maybe that needs to be rethought, but that's what we're going to test. Certainly land use compatibility, you know, there is an active port nearby and we have to balance the development aspirations with preserving some of those important industrial uses like Redpath and Lafarge, cement factory. What is the affordable housing percentage? Because there's a lot of interest in increasing that. So we'll see how much affordable housing we can add, as well as hopefully some other market housing as well. And then the enabling infrastructure. So there's storm sewer, sanitary sewer. We think the trunk lines probably can handle a lot more density, but the local lines that are existing cannot. And some of what is planned may or may not be able to. So we need to do that work, you know, relatively quickly and make sure that either we're building the right size infrastructure now, or we have a plan for adding some in the future if that's what we need. And then there's a huge number of policy guidelines that were written into the OP surrounding development on Villiers. We think we can conform to most of them, but there will likely be 1 or 2 where we're going to need to try and amend those policies to allow some of this density. So all of that is going to be looked at in the due diligence, and that will all have to format, get put into whatever gets brought forward to council for approval in the future. So it's a very robust study. And then just in terms of timing, we have a rollout planned. Before I go through this, I'm just going to caveat that this was laid out before Mayor Tory resigned. The by-election may require us to change some of these dates so that we're not conducting work that shouldn't be conducted during an election period. But we've been targeting basically February through September as our first phase. We've already completed one of the tasks, the first box, which is to go to the Planning and Housing Committee of the city They confirmed that they want us to look at that higher density. So, and that is now encoded in a publicly accessible report. So we're looking at more density under council direction. We're also going to then do some interviews with landowners and stakeholders to get a sense of their concerns, hopes, feelings about more density. We've heard anecdotally that many members of the community feel the island could take more density, but we want to actually reach out to people and have specific conversations around that. This is going to go to our design review panel. We're going to be showing them some of the different options for how to add density to the island without, at least we hope, without compromising the urban character that everybody wants the island to achieve. And so the panel will have an opportunity to weigh in on that. And then there's going to be at least a virtual public meeting, which we may supplement with an actual in-person kind of public open house, depending on how people are feeling about those things at that point in time, so that a broad public can weigh in on this. And then throughout all these phases, there will be ongoing Indigenous engagement, which you see in that long bar on the bottom. The second phase, we will go back to the design review panel with what we think is a preferred development scenario in terms of massing and urban design for the island that achieves the higher density. And then we want to take that preferred concept out for another full round of public engagement, and then ultimately report back to the Housing and Planning Committee with that preferred concept and what additional densities we've achieved, what additional affordable housing we've been able to achieve. And then the third phase will be to hold, to really do the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw process, which will include a statutory public meeting. That's required, part of any OPA or ZBL process. We will have already consulted twice with the public before that. So we're doing well beyond what's normally required in terms of hearing from the public. And so I think that should position us hopefully pretty well to get this finally through planning and housing committee at the end. So the goal is to have this wrapped by January, but again, if there's an election in June, some of these dates may need to get pushed depending on city staff's comfort with doing a lot of public engagement in the middle of an election.
So the other factor, and we'll get into further discussion in closed session, but we have a report back to council around the BIP and our roles and responsibilities targeted for the end of the year that, we're working with the city as to what the election might do to that. But we are targeting to be ready at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any uncertainty about what the program is going to be for the by-election. Do we think that somebody's going to put that off the rails?
No, I think the concern is cities generally during elections, city council tries not to conduct business. Correct. I'm not sure they've ever had a by-election like this. So no one seems quite certain what the ruling is going to be on whether or not any sort of business like this can be conducted in that period. Yeah. So that's where the uncertainty comes from.
So it's just so that maybe this is a question of anyone's answer. So, but committees will continue to meet during the written period.
I think so.
I know I'm asking.
Well, I think so, but
we have city members on the
is somebody
meeting.
knowledgeable
David?
person there?
David Stonehouse on?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, David couldn't make it. It's Jay Palaja here from the Waterfront Secretariat. Committees will meet through the election period. I think there is both strategic and technical considerations on whether it's desirable to go at certain times. And also, practically from an agenda management perspective. So, as Chris and George indicated, I think it's something that we'll work through.
Thank you.
I think that's it for Villiers. So
I think, I sent an email out to all board members just referencing the density study that we're engaged in, so everybody knows.
Sure. Alrighty, Alicia or Andrew, any questions of Chris? Leslie? Anybody else on the board?
Can I just ask,
Sorry.
just to the going to the committee, the Planning and Housing Committee, is it a tradition of the organization to allow committee members tours of the site so that that any who have not seen the site, or sometimes it's helpful to just physically stand there. Have you already done that?
We've offered,
already.
we haven't had a lot of uptake on it, unfortunately, but And that might be something with Counselor Malik that we can work on to encourage.
Especially over the nicer weather months. Hopefully we can get,
Yeah, okay. I just, the chair of the committee, for example, would be a
Yeah.
good person to get out there.
Yeah, for sure. So I can guarantee the offer goes out and whatever we can do to improve the response to the offers.
We usually offer pre-briefings for them, and sometimes they don't even all show up for
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
getting them out for a tour is even,
Yeah.
more time consuming for them, but they may do it.
Hey, we'll work with the city to see what we can do on that.
Excellent. Okay, then. So with that, then I would like to have a motion to go into closed session, please. Leslie and Alicia, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. We're back in open session. Then I would like to have a resolution relating to the minutes of November the 25th. Is there any particular form of that resolution other than there?
Yeah,
It's just there.
Thank you. So this is the motion to approve those minutes. Alicia's got her hands up, moving it. Thank you. Leslie seconded.
Mhm.
All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? I declare that carried. Okay, so then that's it. So I need a motion to terminate the meeting.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
No, I
And
need somebody, not Ian.
I'll take
Andrew,
Andrew
okay.
and Alicia. Thank you. So this meeting is now terminated.